Hello, spooky friends. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to do another mini deep dive on the spiritual slash occult figures. And today we are going to be discussing Marie Laveau. And I'm sure most of you know who she is, or at least have heard of her, because her legacy is very much still alive today. She was a character in American Horror Story, and I'm sure other movies as well. And as a little disclaimer, because she's such an older figure, she was alive during the early 1800s. The information I'm going to give you and the research that I've done, there are things that some people say is not true. There are things that some people say is true. So just take it with a grain of salt. And there's really no way to actually fact check some of these things because she was alive so long ago. And during this time, they didn't have a lot of accurate records and so on and so forth. So, yeah, let's talk about her. Laveau is best known as the VooDoo Priestess or the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans during her time. Marie Catherine Laveau was born September 10th, 1801, making her a Virgo. Now, there is some confusion regarding her accurate year of birth, but we're just going to go with 1801. Marie Laveau was born to an African mother, and she does not have a father on her birth certificate. And I believe, while I was doing my research, the reason is because her mother was the mistress, and I believe that her father may have been a white man, but people say his name was Charles. Marie was born of African, European, and Native American descent, and it is also said that she was the firstborn free in her family. Marie's great-grandmother came to New Orleans as a slave from West Africa in the mid-1700s. Her grandmother, Catherine, was purchased by a free woman of color. Catherine was eventually able to buy her freedom and build a home in the French Quarter where Marie Laveau would eventually live there, and that's where she would reside as the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans. Marie Laveau married a Creole man named Jacques Perry. Now, forgive me if I mispronounce some of these names. They are French, so I am not trying to be disrespectful. I might mispronounce them, okay? So bear with me here. But Marie Laveau married Jacques Perry, and some researchers say that they did not have any children. However, according to baptismal records, it is said they had two daughters who are suspected to have died in their childhood due to the various diseases that were going around in that time period. And later on, Jacques Perry would also pass away, but some people like to say that he mysteriously vanished, which I don't know why they try to make it so dramatic, but he just passed away, and it wasn't this big mystery because Marie Laveau would later refer to herself as the Widow Perry. Around 1826, Marie found love again with a man. I'm going to call him Louis Christophe because I cannot pronounce his last name. Louis Christophe, and he was said to be born of white parents, so he was a wealthy white man from a prominent New Orleans family. And they would spend his last 30 years in a common law marriage, and they really loved each other. They were not legally able to marry because interracial marriage was illegal back then. So they were common law married, but they had several children who some were said to not have survived because the yellow fever was sort of raging through everybody during this time. However, it is said that there might have been one or two girls who lived the longest out of their several children, which I think they said it was like they had 15 children or something like that together. But how sad that some of her babies ended up passing away. Yes, so it is said that Marie, one of her daughters, who was also named Marie, was born of this common law marriage, and she was the longest living of the children. And it is said that she would eventually succeed her mother as the voodoo queen of New Orleans. Marie Laveau was a committed wife and a loving mother. She very much was of service to her community. They would come to her for spells, spiritual advice, things like that. She was a root worker, obviously, so she might have offered maybe some type of alternative medicines, things like that. Interestingly, it is said that Marie was a very devout Catholic and she would attend Mass regularly, which she obviously had to have been a Catholic because she is buried in a Catholic cemetery. So even though she's like known as this voodoo queen, she obviously was involved in Catholicism to have been buried at a Catholic cemetery. So something to think about. But it said her home was filled with images of saints and that she created a very sacred space for her clients and people that would come and visit her. And she also ministered to prisoners, and she would offer guidance to redemption and forgiveness through Catholicism and through Jesus. So she was very spiritual. She had a strong faith. Now, one of the most popular things that people say about her is that she was a hairdresser. However, if you ask maybe like a very educated New Orleans tour guide or historian, some of them would say that she, in fact, was not a hairdresser. But according to some of my research, she was, and it said that she used this to create stability for herself and her family financially, and that this was the way that she would interact with clients. She would interact with Black clients and wealthy white clients as well. So she sort of knew the tea and the gossip and everything about everybody through this job. She very much knew what was going on with everybody, and she knew everyone's business, and she would give advice when people would come to her. And it was said that politically affluent individuals paid Laveau for her advice and guidance and intervention of certain situations, and maybe for protection of some sort. So now, the reason I don't find it weird that she was possibly a practicing and devout Catholic is because voodoo is known to be, New Orleans voodoo is known to be the only Afro-Catholic religion to emerge in North America, and that it's sort of mixed with Catholicism and voodoo together. New Orleans voodoo was born of the influence of not only the African nations that were at the root of the religion, but also New World colonies. So upon my research, they spell it VODOU. I believe it's pronounced VooDoo, but it is said that it was historic in the Western African Kingdom, and it was transported to the United States during the transatlantic slave trade. Voodoo in New Orleans consisted of root work, and people would seek out conjurers or other spiritualists for spiritual intervention and protection in their daily affairs. It is said by some that Marie was the granddaughter of a very powerful priestess from Africa, and Laveau reportedly had a familial background in African spirituality, so she was able to undergo the tutelage of knowledgeable and well-respected root workers ahead of her. Laveau would counsel her practitioners by supplying them with protective and spiritual tools and objects such as candles, powders, and an assortment of other items. So Marie did not take long at all to dominate the culture and society of voodoo in New Orleans. And as queen of several decades, Laveau became known as a mother and well-known public figure to many who went to her for advice, protection, or work. As queen, Marie was said to have different places that she would practice or hold ceremonies. So one was her house, the other was Congo Square, and lastly, Lake Pontchartrain. Sorry if I mispronounced that, okay? It's it's spelled very weird, so please forgive me. Said in her backyard, she would have ceremonies where she conjured the great spirit of the great Zombai, the deity who would manifest through a snake. Congo Square was a public square that was set aside by city officials as a gathering space for both enslaved and free African people, and she would gather there with her followers on Sundays to dance and worship. No real big major ceremonies would take place there. It was just a place of spiritual gathering and rejuvenation for her followers. And the lake would have ceremonies as well on the shore. And it was here that major ceremonies are said to have taken place. And this is where supposedly they would initiate people into the religion, and that Marie would be accompanied by her quote unquote king, which would be her second ranking male official. Now, some of this may have been dramatized throughout history, but it is said there at the lake they would sing, dance, and drum, and spirit possessions would occur during these gatherings. And it is also said that curious white people would often sneak into the woods to witness these rituals and ceremonies, and that they would report extreme tales of what they witnessed. And there are also stories that there would be other women and there would be rivalries occurring over who should be the voodoo priestess of this region at the time. It is said that before Marie Laveau took over as queen, there were two other women who preceded her, that there would be other women who would try to steal her title as well. However, Marie indeed kept her title for a very long time. Marie reigned unchallenged until 1850, until another Creole woman named Rosalie attempted to challenge Laveau's position. And to create a sense of fear, it is said that Rosalie placed a huge life-sized wooden doll in her yard that was imported from Africa, and it had beads and intricate carvings all over it, and this would scare the voodoo community, kind of install like fear and also respect the community so that people would respect Rosalie. When this happened, it is said that Marie stole the statue and they had to go to court over this statue, and they kind of just said, okay, let's get rid of the whole thing. There will be no voodoo statue to fight over. June 15th, 1881, Madame Marie Laveau passed away at the age of 79. Her funeral was lavish and attended by a wide, diverse audience with members of both black and white. And after her death, of course, there were people who would say that they would still see her around town. There's even people today that still say, you know, she might be walking the streets of New Orleans. If you're there, sometimes you can see her spirit. Some historians have differing opinions whether or not Marie Laveau was actually buried at the St. Louis Cemetery number 1, because some believe that there's no way a voodoo priestess, if she was an actual voodoo priestess, would be buried in a Catholic cemetery. But some of them believe maybe her body is somewhere else, but we really don't know, like I said, because she's such a mysterious figure and there's little accurate information that we know of on her. So take that as you will. It is said that many tourists venture from all over to go visit her crypt in this St. Louis Cemetery number 1. However, it used to be open to the public, but because there was lots of vandalism and there was a mentally unstable man who actually painted her crypt like Pepto-Bismol pink is what they said, they had to, kind of only allow visitors via tour guide. But people would go and they would leave her offerings, and they would do this thing where they would draw X marks. And it is said to be in accordance with the decade-old tradition that if people wanted Marie Laveau to grant them a wish, they would draw 3 X's on the tomb, turn around 3 times, knock on the tomb, yell their wish, and if it was granted, come back, circle the X, and leave Laveau an offering. But some people say that this is not tied to any voodoo tradition at all. It's just things that, humans do. But yeah, if you like Google pictures of her tomb and all that, you will see that people really did do the little X's and all that, and they leave offerings for her. And there's also a tour that you can take where it shows, I believe it's her home where she resided, her cottage. People will leave offerings there. They'll leave offerings of hair ties, coins, tobacco, I believe alcohol. But you can definitely go to New Orleans today and take a tour and learn about her. And I'm sure there's way more well educated and well researched historians and tour guides that can give you more accurate information. It is hard to get information on her because, like I said, she's so mysterious, but also it's like between legend and lore, and where is the actual factual things, because her presence is legendary, and she's obviously like a character in American Horror Story, and people dramatize some information about her. So yeah, it's very lore-ish, you know what I mean? But still very interesting, and obviously she had to have been somebody, because we all have heard of her and know of her. In pop culture, they call her a witch, they call her a voodoo priestess, the queen of voodoo. She obviously made a big name for herself. It's said one of her daughters, who was also named Marie, possibly assumed her position and would take over as queen soon before and after her mother's death. So that was her quote unquote successor. And later, obviously, this type of practices and history would sort of dwindle out because of colonization, and it was the early 1800s, so I'm sure new things were being developed and people sort of strayed away from older practices. But that was some information about Miss Marie Laveau, the voodoo queen, voodoo priestess, if you will. I hope you loved listening and learning about her. When I was researching her, I was like, wow, woman is so mysterious, like I said. And you can find lots of information on her. Like I said, there are historians and researchers who go back and forth about certain things, but it's only because of she was born in 1801, so I'm sure there's not a lot of records or information that you can dig up and actually, find and confirm and all that good stuff. But I hope you loved listening anyway. Stay safe. Have a great rest of the week. Bye, friends.